Hi, my name is Andi Ervin. I am an educational advocate with Treehouse. Thank you for joining us today. I've been with Treehouse for a little over a year and a half and serve as an educational advocate for Thurston, Grays Harbor, and Pacific counties. And today I have my friend from Eastern Washington with me. Dora, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Dora Patchen, and I have been working at Treehouse for 4 years now. And I'm serving Chelan, Douglas, and Okanogan Country. We would like to welcome every one of you that have joined us today. And we just want to remind each one of you that you can leave us a question at the bottom and we will be able to answer all those questions as much as we can. So leave us a message in the chat box. So what do we do as advocates and when did the program start? Around 2001, the advocacy program began serving the foster youth in King County. After 5 years in King County, Treehouse contracted with Children Administration to expand the program statewide. January 2006, the first statewide team of advocacy was hired to serve all pre-K and 12th graders, youth across the Washington state. And the schools, I think, is something about 294 school districts that we are currently working along with. And in any case, any given year, we serve roughly 1,300 youths a year. And so, Andi, how would you describe our program?
Well, so first of all, 1,300 is a lot of kids to serve in a year. How we reach that many youth is we kind of use a bit of, if we liken it to a medical model, educational advocates are sort of like emergency room doctors for education. There's an immediate need that's identified by the social worker or the school or the caregiver, and a youth is referred into educational advocacy. And our role is to come in and build the capacity of the youth's natural supports. And those natural supports are typically the caregiver, foster parents, schools, and social workers, guardian ad litems, kind of that whole system that stays with that child through the time that they are in foster care. So we work to facilitate and support the development of educational plans to meet whatever immediate need brought them into our purview. Once those natural supports are in place, then we gently leave them to the team, who we could say are like the primary care doctors, right? So in a story, an example that I have about kind of how that looked is a student was referred to me last year for increased access to school services due to lack of academic progress. One of the first things that we often do is request education records. Okay, someone thinks there's a problem. Let me see what I see in the data. And in that records review, what I noticed is that this particular student had failed all of the school hearing screens. So I got a hold of the social worker and the caregiver and recommended a referral to audiology. You know, the first question is this student not progressing academically because the student can't hear well? Through that process, through audiology, we learned that he actually had bilateral hearing impairment. And so then that facilitated getting hearing aids and then also developing an individual education plan that would provide the adequate level of assistive technology through like FM devices to use in the classroom, and an educational plan to help this youth get caught up. Once this youth had access to the necessary supports in his educational plan and with the hearing aids that were necessary, then I could step away from serving that youth and leave that youth with their natural supports. So that, for me, that was a real success story because this particular student, he could do very well if he could hear, but had fallen really significantly behind because he wasn't getting all of the instruction. So that's sort of an example of how we function as sort of the emergency immediate need players in the time that a youth is in care. So right now, this is a really different time. We are in the middle of a pandemic with COVID-19, and that has certainly changed our education system. Dora, let's talk about some of the unique challenges that we've faced due to our current situation with COVID-19.
Well, Andi, indeed, as you have mentioned, we living in such a time where things have just, changed. But things started off pretty irregular. Information from the state superintendent was evolving rapidly, and schools were trying to figure things out. And so a process was put in place by some of our schools, and the schools were feeling more challenged because of not being prepared and not knowing what was going to come. I have to say that other schools were more able to provide resources and services after the 2 weeks that initially the superintendent and Governor Inslee came out that, okay, we're going to be taking a break. Personally, I was impressed with one of my school districts' response after the initial 2 weeks. They began actively seeking ways to begin to provide continuous student learning. And they conducted a telephone survey whereby families were able to check in with their schools to let them know whether they had internet access or not. And then the school were able to plan how and who was going to get a laptop, for example. And those that did not have internet access were able to then get some packets. Unfortunately, though, some of our other schools were not in the same level as those that were able to actively act and provide, resources for some of our students. So the closure of schools have come with some type of inequity for across board. Some schools are doing really well. Other schools have been very slow and delay in the way that they have responded to this COVID-19 and how, learning has turned into a different way. But overall, I just want us to talk a little bit about inequity across board. And so, Andi, what are some of the things that you have experienced during this time in terms of inequity?
Yeah, so the perspective that I have is the inequities that I am seeing as an ed advocate serving youth experiencing foster care are actually not a lot different than the inequities that have been there all along. As much as we try to make public education the great equalizer, we haven't hit that mark for some time, if ever. And some of the challenges for the youth that we work with are related to trauma and high mobility due to placement changes. For years, the youth we serve have been experiencing educational challenges relating to academic performance like grades or adequate services, behaviors resulting from a history of trauma, limited access to technology. So to just kind of dive in a little bit to the limited access of technology, before COVID, our students who were experiencing foster care often didn't have access to computers or internet. But before COVID, they were still expected to complete homework that might require or be made easier if they had internet access at home. Some students have access to free online support, but some of our students don't. And when they're struggling with a concept, they can't just Google Khan Academy and get the help that they need. Many teachers have been using online platforms to post grades, missing assignments, lesson notes, their PowerPoints that they used in the classroom. They've been posting those to online platforms. And some of our students haven't had access to that information. Assignments are submitted through online programs often, especially when students get to high school, before COVID, right? And now that we're in this COVID environment, we've got this bright light shining on these inequities in a much more visible way. But make no mistake, they've been there for a very long time. we at Treehouse tend to be optimists. Our former CEO used to say that we tried to foster a culture of fierce optimism. So along that thread, I'm going to be fiercely optimistic. And I'm going to say that I want to move forward with hope, that we have real conversations about these inequities and that we begin to really respond to them. And I hear this being discussed at OSPI. So that makes me hopeful. It makes me hopeful that not only will we examine this at a state level, but also at our local education level, in our school boards, in our local systems, because what we're seeing in inequities, those have been there.
That's right, Andi. And as you mentioned, our state superintendent himself stated that he was going to make it a personal goal as well as a state goal for all kids to be able to have access to internet, if it means hotspot, whatever it's going to take, because the inequity is really across board, like you said, where those kids that have access to internet, for example, are able to access different resources to help them in their educational learning. Those kids that do not have access to internet have to deal with packets. And they are not, even at this time, some of my students that are working on packets do not get the access that they could readily be able to communicate with their teachers if they are having challenges and difficulties, right? And so that makes it not equitable. And so I am so glad that we have a state superintendent who is going to make this goal effective for every student to have that opportunity so that there won't be any barriers, because the goal is to help all kids in our state to be able to have equal and equitable education in all aspects. And so I am ruling for that to happen as soon as, and I think that, like you said, this inequity has continued even before this happened, but I think that it has kind of peeled the onions where now we can see the center of it is obvious. And so a change needs to come. But in moving on, I would like us to address a little bit about our special educational kids that have special needs, and wondering how your schools, your districts are able to put in place to support those of our kids that are in need of individualized plan.
Yeah, so before moving on to the special education conversation, we did have a question come in, Dora. And the question is from Alex on Facebook, and it says, what drew you to the work you do at Treehouse? Would you like to answer that, or would you like me to answer that?
I can answer that. What drew me personally is the fact that a lot of kids in schools were falling behind so much in education. And then when I learned more about kids in foster care, especially, were falling into cracks, and they were falling at a rate where were not graduating. And a lot of them were just not wanting to continue because they moved to so many different homes sometimes, and their instability makes them to want to give up and not want to continue. And so when I learned about Treehouse and the mission that they have, it was something that I personally wanted to be part of. I wanted to be able to engage and support alongside with the schools and Children Administration, DCYF, to be able to help collaborate as a team in making sure that when our kids move, for example, into another district, then their grades, their credits will continue to follow them. And then they will know that they can graduate, rather than being able to not have the continual education. And then, they feel like they have to repeat, and then, they just want to give up. So that's my personal reason, is being able to help.
Right. Yeah, I was drawn to Treehouse because of their mission to even the playing field for youth who are experiencing trauma and mobility and challenges like many of us can't even imagine. And I want education to be the equalizer for our youth, regardless of their circumstances. And I want them to be more, I want us to see them as more than their experiences. I want us to look at their future, and I want us to grow them and foster them. And this was a great match for me in that way. And being an extreme data geek, I'm unashamed to admit that. Treehouse had me at their data. When I was doing research before deciding whether or not to apply for the position, I went to the website and saw the change that had occurred with students that had worked with Treehouse support. That was so compelling to me, and I was really excited to be part of this team. And make no mistake, I have no regrets. So moving on to special education. I have been very pleased that IEP, individual education plans for students with special education, their plans are required to be reviewed annually. Those have absolutely continued in a remote way through video conferencing. Special education teachers are gathering teams to prepare for next year and get those plans in place. And I've been really impressed by that. But again, there's challenges with this as well, because teachers, they really can't provide the level of services in a distance model that was being provided in person. And so our students with the need for specially designed instruction through the special education system, they are not getting what they once were. And frankly, that's not at the fault of the school per se. So an example, a really tangible example, I have a severely dyslexic upper elementary student who's unable to read right now, recently diagnosed this year with dyslexia. This student can't get the specialized vision therapy and is struggling to access any of the remote learning material. Before school closures, this student was receiving 1,000 hours of special education per week, because mostly 100% of her time was in the special education setting. Her remote learning plan that we just reviewed has 190 minutes a week. And that, again, that's not the special education teacher or the school's fault, because often that specially designed instruction is done concurrently with multiple students with similar needs. And now it needs to be in this individualized way in a distance learning environment. And so those are some real concerns that I have moving forward that will be a consequence of this moment, of this time. What are you noticing, Dora?
Well, I'm noticing quite a bit. For example, some of the challenges that the caregivers are currently facing is I feel that they have not been given all the tools that they need and trainings to de-escalate our high level of kids that have special, social and emotional trauma. And it's been a real challenge for some of my caregivers who have really tried to manage both school as well as, the child's emotions. And so I've been very, very happy with some of my school districts that have really stepped up in trying to alleviate some of this stress that comes with, taking care of our kids, the youths, as well as trying to teach them, and so some of my school districts have been providing para support for those of my kids that have individualized educational plan. And those kids, depending on what their plan looks like, they have been able to get math support, reading support with a para for about 30 minutes. And that has really has kind of de-escalate and helped not only, our youths, but also has helped the caregivers to be able to help other kids that are in a home that also have some social and emotional as well as academic challenges. And then, they have time to also be able to support the other kids that are in their homes. And so that has been really good. Another thing that has been really challenging at this time that I want to stress is that unfortunately, due to some of the high level of stress that has taken place, a few of my students had to be removed from their homes, their current homes, into other places, whether it be a facility where, you know, they needed that stability to be able to cope with what the crisis that's taking place. And others, unfortunately, also have their behavior have escalated to the level where the caregivers have not been able to help maintain them in a home. And sadly, because there is not enough foster homes, our kids had to stay in a hotel. And so that part has been very, very unfortunate. But overall, I know that most caregivers are doing fantastic work. And as is May is Caregiving Month, I want to give shout out to all our wonderful caregivers. Thank you so much for the work that you do. We understand the challenges that you go through, and we just want to say you are our heroes. And we just appreciate all the support that you continue to do and give to our youth across the state. And the more that you do, we know, we see it, we experience it, and we talk with you, all of you. So we just want to thank you so much for the things that, you know, you continue to do. So Andi,
we are kind of coming to the end of our time, Dora. We have a few questions that have popped up. And a couple of them I actually think we're going to need, because we don't have a lot of time left today. I think we're going to need to answer after we're live here. But there is one that I'd like to answer, and that is, are referrals going down with youth not being in the school setting? And I can say, no, they are not. As we're nearing the end of the school year, I've been actually really surprised by the number of referrals that are coming in this late in the school year. So we at Advocates at Treehouse, honestly, we pivoted really quickly to this distance learning and this new way of doing things. Thankfully, we were already flexible in that way and set up for that. And we hit the ground running within minutes of school canceling, not even days. So nope, referrals are not going down, and we keep plugging along, don't we, Dora?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And Andi, as we are wrapping up, I just want you to just tell me very quickly, what do you love about your work?
My favorite thing is the diversity of the work. There is never one day that is the same as the next, nor the same as the prior. And I love that diversity and flexibility. And I just really enjoy bringing teams of people together to look at specifically what is going well for a youth and student, and how can we fertilize what's going well and make it blossom in the other areas. There's always something good that we can look at and that we can highlight and shine on and grow a team and a plan that will support that student. And I love that optimism, and I love the diversity of the work. What about you, Dora?
Oh, I love so many things about the work we do. In agreement with you, I also love the fact that I'm able to collaborate with the schools and work alongside caregivers, and being able to guide them and coach them as to, for example, the process of how to get educational needs and support for our youth. And so being able to coach them is a big thing that I really appreciate, because then when we do leave them, they have the tools and the means to be able to know, you know, how to continue with that support for all of our youth. And being able to work with our older students, as we don't have graduation success on my side. And so I love, again, being able to coach the kids to be able to have hands-on and do things. So yeah, it's been wonderful. And I continue to want to be a strong support for, all our youth as we do this work.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for tuning in today. Treehouse is going to be hosting Facebook Live every Wednesday and Friday around noon. So be sure to tune in throughout the month of May, which is National Foster Care Month, to hear directly from our staff and our youth. Thank you again and have a wonderful afternoon and be safe and be healthy. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.